My name's Matthew Smith and I am the Creative Director of Desk-Tidy Design. It was never my dream to be a graphic designer. What I really wanted to be was an actor. I did always enjoy art and design at school, and my mum was always very creative, but it was the theatre that I loved, and that was the path I chose, all the way to drama school and beyond. Unfortunately, it turns out I was a terrible actor, and over time, when I was working in bars and front of house at theatres and restaurants, and I had fewer and fewer auditions, it struck me that I needed to find something else to do. I needed a job that would support me long term, that I could still be passionate about, but wouldn't mean that I'd wasted years and finances on becoming an actor and my love for the theatre. I had already dabbled in some kind of use of Photoshop because I had made my own website for my acting. This was before services like Wix and Squarespace were readily available. But it wasn't until I was on tour with a production of Dracula that I really had this light bulb moment. The designer for that company had suddenly parted ways to follow a different path, and they were desperate for someone to make their programs. Now, I had my laptop with me with a not strictly legal version of Photoshop on it, so I put my hand up, and that's literally how it started. With no kind of knowledge, skill or experience, just a willingness to help. From there, I designed that theatre company's next poster, which was for Comedy of Errors. It was a terrible poster because I had literally no idea what I was doing. But what I loved then, and what I still love now, is taking my love and knowledge for the theatre, my knowledge of that play, its characters, its themes, its storyline, and condensing it into one image. This leads to my first big piece of advice. Know your subject. Whether it's a poster, a logo, a menu for a restaurant, you need to know that subject inside out. Do your research. Become an expert on that specific thing. It's only then will you be in the best place to create something that sells that product, that show, truthfully. From Comedy of Errors, I stuck with this theatre company and continued to design their theatre posters for them. They stuck with me, not because I was particularly good or the posters were any good, but mainly because I was doing it for free. For a long time, this theatre company was my only client. I was still working 2 or 3 other jobs as well, bars, restaurants, front of house, because I was still trying to become an actor. My new plan was to become proficient enough at Photoshop and design that it could become my job in between acting jobs. The idea being that I could work my own hours, I could pick my jobs, and if I did need to go off on tour or go to Panto, I could leave at the moment's notice without trying to organise time off or quit my job. This was an ignorant idea, which will become clear later on. However, I had decided this was going to be my path. That was probably an ignorant idea, which will become clear later on, but this was my path. I was going to be an actor / graphic designer. Now, whatever level of design you're working at, it can be an incredibly stressful job. Whether that's tight deadlines, difficult clients, a creative block. But at the beginning, the most stressful thing was the responsibility of designing someone's poster, which they needed to sell their show, but having absolutely no idea how to use Photoshop. My next big lesson is to know your tools. Programs like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign are incredible pieces of kit The potential is endless, but with that comes a very steep learning curve. 10 years down the line, and I'm pretty sure I'm just scraping the surface of what these programs are capable of. However, now more than ever before, there is a massive array of online classes and lessons to help you learn everything you could possibly need and more. The most efficient, cheapest and best source is YouTube. This is exactly where I learn everything that I use and do today. Particularly good channels are Piximperfect, Flurm, and the Adobe Creative Cloud live streams. They are particularly brilliant. There are other services like Domestika and Skillshare, which are paid for services. I think Skillshare is $9.99 a month, but within that you do get a higher quality level of class. Aaron Draplin, who is an incredible logo designer, the Studio DKNG, who do all vectorized artwork for incredibly famous bands, all have lessons on there, as well as a wide range of creative and entertainment based skills. But I learned everything that I needed to on YouTube, to the point where it became an obsession, but it kind of needed to. If I wasn't working or sleeping, I was watching YouTube videos about Photoshop. Even now, 10 years later, whereas most people are binging a new series on Netflix, I'm watching YouTube, learning new skills and constantly improving myself. It's a stressful industry, especially if you're coming in new, not knowing anything about it like I was. The best way to combat this is to educate yourself. Know what the difference between RGB and CYMK is. Know what a document bleed means. Know what DPI you should be using for a particular project. These are all things that I didn't know when I started. And when I was working with printers and marketing companies, very quickly I was labelled as an amateur because of it. Another excellent way to learn is to look at what other designers in your field or that you admire are putting out and the kind of work they do. Now, by no means do I mean you should go and copy their ideas or steal their work, but looking at the techniques they use, the style they use, the trends at the moment is only going to help benefit you as a designer. Influence is going to be a massive part of your growth as a designer. My work over the last 10 years has been massively influenced by designers that I admire. People like Rebecca Pitt, Stephanie Pine, the bigger design houses like De Winters, Bob Kings, Muse Creative, all designers at the top of their game who are putting out incredible work. If you study and look up to these designers, you're not going to go far wrong. So as time goes on, my one client is growing and I grow with it. Each new show and project is an opportunity to learn and improve on the design before. Over time, I managed to convince myself that it was time I start getting paid. This was a really scary step. Up to now, I've been working for free or for very low rates. My fear was that I was still new, I still didn't really know what I was doing, and I was competing against designers that were far more qualified and experienced than I was. If I started charging for the work, they may as well go with a designer who knows what they're doing, or go to another designer desperate for work who could equally work for free or for the exposure like I currently was. But I plucked up the courage because I felt like I deserved to be paid for the work I was doing, and thankfully my client agreed. So finally I was earning a wage for what had basically been a hobby up until this point, but a hobby that was taking up all of my time. But as that company grew, my work was getting exposed to more and more people. Over time, as the projects became more prolific, more and more people were seeing my work, and over time people were contacting me to design their posters for them. I was also being exposed more often to other areas of the theatre industry, marketing companies, design studios, and forging a relationship with these people led me to new clients, and this is eventually how my design business grew. At this time, around 2014, I still wasn't really charging a lot, barely anything, because I was scared if I outpriced myself, my clients would go elsewhere. However, by this point, I had a constant stream of work. I had completely given up on auditioning and given up my other part-time jobs because I simply didn't have time to fit it in with all my design work. What this did mean, though, eventually, was that I bankrupted myself. It meant that I had to give up my flat in London and I had to move home to my parents' home in Somerset. This was a difficult time because moving back with your parents in your mid-20s isn't really part of the life plan. However, what it did mean, for better or for worse, is that for 2 years I could completely and utterly focus on my design work. Every day I would wake up, walk across my bedroom floor to my computer, and I would work until I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. I would do this nearly every day, 7 days a week, for 2 years. And this is how I carved out my career. I honed skills, I developed a style, I set up proper pricing, I forged relationships with theatre companies and marketing companies. Eventually got to a point after incredibly hard work that I could move out of my parents' home and I could afford rent in a flat in Bristol purely from my design work. And it has been my full-time job ever since. A few years ago, a bigger company saw worth in me and my design, and they helped me develop the company into a full limited studio. I'm now the creative director of Destined Design. I have staff. We work with some of the biggest theatre companies in the country, and our work is seen by people all over the world, all from 10 years ago, raising my hand to help with something that I had no idea how to do. As my mum likes to tell people, if Matthew can build a career out of watching YouTube videos, anyone can. My computer, now it's very easy to go and spend an absolute fortune on gear, but when I started out I had no money and rubbish equipment, and I got by absolutely fine. My laptop at the time was my mum's old laptop, I believe, which used to crash constantly, but I got by, and every time I earned a little bit of money from my job, I would invest a little bit back in myself, and over time I improved the equipment I was using. Stuff that I use day to day are notepad and pen. This is lined, dotted and squares, incredibly useful and essential. Making notes, sketching designs, noting down ideas, inspirations. Headphones. I can't work without listening to music or a podcast. It not only helps inspire me, it takes my mind off particularly difficult jobs as well. Make sure you have something that is lightweight, sounds great, and you can wear for a long period of time, all of which these headphones aren't. These were a terrible purchase, don't buy these ones. Your phone and or camera. Now I have got a DSLR that I use at home, but that was bought after I was making more money with my job. Until then, I use my phone on a daily basis, again, to either snap ideas or screenshot post-it inspirations. I have used photos for national tours that I've been taking on a phone. I do not recommend doing that, but sometimes it's just not the budget or the time to set up a shoot. So use what you have is my biggest advice, and what most of us have is a camera phone. You will be spending a lot of time staring at your screen, so I recommend having a pair of glasses with a blue filter on. Before I bought these. I was getting headaches all the time and I was feeling very, very sick. So I went to the opticians and they recommended these glasses that have a blue filter on that helps with the blue light coming from your screen. They haven't got a prescription in. If they do, it's very, very small. I literally have them to look at the computer screen with. Memory card, memory sticks. I have much bigger ones at home. This ranges from 2 gig up to 8 terabytes that I have at home, but incredibly important. One of the biggest lessons and hardest lessons I ever learned was that whatever work you have, whatever that you've created, should exist in 3 places at the same time. I went through a period of time before this lesson where I was keeping all my work on one external hard drive. Now, it is a fact that inevitably all external hard drives will eventually fail. It's just one of those lessons in life that you don't know how bad it is until it happens to you. And I lost half a decade's worth of work. I had to make some very difficult phone calls to clients. It was not a good time. So now everything I ever do exists in 3 places at the same time. It exists on external hard drive, it exists on Dropbox, and a third universal online system. Something that I find incredibly useful, I use day to day, is a drawing pad. This is not currently the one I use. This was the first one I ever bought. This was about 60 quid. You can probably find them cheaper and or second hand on eBay, which is where I got my latest one from. This allows you to write, draw, paint using Photoshop and Illustrator. There's a little bit of a learning curve again, but once you start using it and you're serious about design, I can highly recommend it and you will never look back. I would say know your tools. So learn how to use Photoshop or Infinity Designer as best you possibly can, so you know how to deliver the best possible product. I would say don't be scared about getting in touch with people to offer your services, and be prepared to tackle a very steep learning curve. An interest in design, an interest in art, if you're hoping to work within the theatre, an interest within the theatre and entertainment industry. I learnt everything I needed to know off YouTube, as the qualifications I have aren't within design, they're in performing, but YouTube has been my best friend over the last 10 years. Difficult question. It completely depends if you're working freelance in a studio, how much you charge if you're working for free at the time to build a portfolio. But from the research I've done, the base wages for a UK designer are between 18 to 31k, just to get you started. Unfortunately, you're probably going to have to work for free or incredibly cheaply to begin with. There is not a shortage of designers out there, and you need to find a way of people picking you over other people. A good way to do that is to create projects for yourself, to start an Instagram feed, to get yourself on Behance, and create work that you enjoy doing and shows you off a designer, and hopefully that will attract clients for years to come. Well, I started as a freelancer 10 years ago, and 10 years later I am the creative director of a studio based in London. The prospects are endless. As long as you love designing and continue wanting to better yourself and become a better designer, there's little you can't achieve in this industry. A vast array of jobs. Other jobs that I've done with these skills is start a t-shirt company. I've started a greeting cards company, but really once you have the knowledge and the desire to design, you can basically do whatever you can dream of, really. In theory, lots. In reality, not much. If you don't want to lose clients, if you don't want to turn down work, and if you need to pay your rent, and unfortunately the curse of the freelancer is you will continue working and never stop, because the fear of losing clients and not having enough money to pay your way is a strong one. But the more successful you get and the more confidence you build, the more time you can take back. If this is a career you're interested in, I learned everything I needed to learn off YouTube, which obviously is a free, incredible resource. Some particularly good YouTube channels that I found incredibly helpful were Flern, Piximperfect, the Adobe Creative Cloud live streams. You've also got services like Skillshare, which you do have to pay for, but arguably offer more in-depth tutorials. People like Aaron Draplin, who is a very famous logo designer in the States, an incredible company called DKNG, who creates incredible vectorized artwork for bands that you would love, offer amazing classes on Skillshare. There really is no end to amazing tutorials, and like I say, everything that I learnt on YouTube. I've got two main things. Firstly, very rarely as a designer will the poster you want to create be the poster that your client needs. That's a very big lesson and difficult lesson I've had to learn many, many times. The second and final thing is to know your worth. It took me far too long to expect any kind of pay for my work and experience. It was a scary step, but it was a necessary one. Your skill and your experience deserves a wage. Don't forget that.